What have you learned since becoming closer to Jordan Peterson?
So I love Jordan. Jordan's great. Jordan's constant willingness to delve is fascinating. Well, we got along the first time we met. I mean, when I met him, he was way less famous. When we met, I don't know, it was like 2015, 2016 maybe. This is right when Bill C-16 was happening. We were both speaking at some event in Canada. And the first thing that we did is we started exchanging book lists. And so, there are a bunch of concepts I've learned from Jordan. I mean, I think that his read on the original structure of meaning in the world and maps of meaning is fantastic. I've used it in sort of biblical analysis of my own. Again, Jordan is somebody who really, really likes to search. That's the thing. And it's always an inspiration to watch him kind of go search for those answers. Even if I don't always agree with his answers, I think they're really interesting.
What about the pivot that he's made, obviously, since coming to DW? It seems like he's been talking more about politics and also more about religion at the same time. There's a bit of me, and I think a lot of my audience, John's been on the show 3 times now, that really misses the spit and sawdust, sort of down-to-earth, less symbolic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see him arc back around.
I agree with a lot of that. I mean, I think that's where Jordan's at I think he's the best in the world at that. I think he's literally the best in the world.
Me too. I think that a lot of the sort of recent vacuum that has sucked in other voices for whether it be masculinity, men's movement, personal development, has been laid at the feet of Jordan's moving on, abandonment of that for other stuff, whether it be politics, whether it be religion.
I think there's some truth to that. I think also because Jordan has been, I mean, it's been a wild trajectory for Jordan. I think because of that, as you experience more kind of power in the universe, as you have a bigger and bigger following, I think Jordan feels a responsibility to delve into these areas. But I agree. I think that a lot of his best stuff is the kind of 12 rules for life. Here's the thing that you can do this morning that's going to make your life a lot better. And I think that Jordan is going to swing back around to that. I think he's taking in a lot of big ideas, and I think you're going to see him infuse that back into kind of the smaller.
I'd love that.
But more
I think
hard.
Yeah, I think that would be very much like a, I don't know, return to.
I would love that. I still think that's his. I agree with you, and I think that he has a new book coming out that's sort of about analysis of the Bible, and it's great. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in there that's fantastic, and him being able to sort of reduce that back down to, like, if you see a cat, pet it, like that kind of stuff. That's the best stuff of Jordan. And if you watch Jordan speak, that's what's great about Jordan. Watching Jordan speak is almost like watching a really great magician do a trick. He'll kind of do a bunch of stuff out here, and you're like, I don't even see how all these puzzle pieces fit together. And then he'll go, and that's bloody well God, isn't it? And you're like, oh, wow, that was cool. That was a really cool trick.
He brings it back into land. Have you changed much since being friends with him? Has there been anything that you've adjusted in yourself?
I think that the temptation toward, advice giving has definitely increased, because when you talk to Jordan, he's constantly talking about, like, how do you affect people on a personal level. I think that there's been a weird sort of shift in the sense that I used to do kind of pure politics and no life advice, and now I do a little bit more life advice and maybe slightly less politics, and he does more politics and more life advice. So maybe we're having a nefarious influence on one another. But I think that again, I don't think there's a better voice on planet Earth for kind of the values that young men should hold than Jordan.
I agree about I always want to ask people about their personal philosophies, about how they approach life. I understand that after a while you kind of need to transcend yourself and stop being so solipsistic or narcissistic or whatever, and you need to actually go out there and affect things.
Also, Jordan's very intellectually curious, and I think that anybody who has a high IQ and is intellectually curious, it's very easy to sort of get bored in the sphere that you're in and be like, I want to explore like a new field now.
Fully understood.
And Jordan is constantly doing that sort of stuff, but I do think he's going to, and I think increasingly you're seeing it, he's going to bring it back into a lot of these messages that are easier to digest.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
There was a Kurt Vonnegut quote that I came across recently that I want to talk to you about. We are what we pretend to be, so we must be careful about what we pretend to be. Do you ever worry about becoming a caricature of yourself, that there are incentives that align in order for you to play into a niche that you've already carved out? Basically, how do you allow yourself to change privately when the world has expectations of you publicly, and is there a tension or a friction between those two things?
The truth is that I think that I'm pretty well on air who I'm off air. I think that the perception of me, for a wide variety of reasons, ranging from the titling of YouTube videos to sort of how I'm perceived on Twitter, is a bit different. Listen, Twitter as a medium tends to suck out your vitriol and your acid, and you're not going to have a lot of...
Not at your best.
Well, at my best as a human, sure. struggle to think of anybody who's at their best as a human on Twitter, because either it's very one-dimensional Twitter. You're either the person who's like the self-help guru on Twitter, you're like Adam Grant or something. Adam's great. Or you're kind of in the combat mode in Twitter. And it's a mechanism of distribution, and you see that. In terms of my show, I think people actually have a pretty good read on me if they watch the show, because I do talk about, from time to time, family stuff, or I will talk about, deeper values. Again, even the show tends to be more political because it's a daily political show. If you watch, it's easy to say this, but if you watch the vast compendium of the things that I do, and I do like a bunch of different shows, then that's me. Like you put all those different, but every show has to focus on sort of a different thing. So if you watch me in discussion with Anna Kasparian or something, you'll see a different side of me than you would if I was like hard pressing on Kamala Harris on Today's Show. Right? So those are all different facets of me. And if you put them all together, then that's very close to what I am in private life. When I talk on a show like this, I'm not sure that there's something radically different. I think that the questions that are being elicited are radically different, and so that changes. It's really funny. I've mentioned this in the context of different political debates. So I will say a thing that if I said it on my show, my audience would be mad at me. If I say it to Bill Maher, my audience is super happy with me. Right. So
what's an example of that?
Okay, so if I say I think that Donald Trump has a lot of personal foibles, I think that he says a lot of dumb stuff on Truth Social, and I think it doesn't help him in his race, then my audience might get mad at me for saying that on my show. I'll say, like, listen, I want him to win. I think Kamala Harris is terrible. I think she'll be an awful president. If Trump wants to win, he needs to stop doing dumb crap on Truth Social. My audience might be a little mad at me. If I go on Bill Maher and I say, listen, I think Donald Trump does a lot of stupid crap on Truth Social. He really needs to win. Kamala Harris can be a terrible president. Then my entire audience is like, he's telling Bill Maher. Right, so
they understand that the medium is the message in many ways.
Exactly. So I think that that's something to keep in mind. I've likened it to the optical illusion where you have where you have a color and it's the color red and it's the same exact color red, but if you put it next to one color, it looks purple, and if you put it next to another color, then it looks more red.
Yeah. So I think over time as well, the thing that I'm particularly interested in is there are expectations by your audience that if you continue to nudge those over time, well, this isn't the Ben that we had previously, even within this context of the show. And I wonder about what happens as you grow up, as your philosophical viewpoint.
It's definitely a struggle. I mean, not even in terms of philosophical viewpoint, but in terms of where you put your focus. One of the things that, as a business, one of the things that you have to consider is, what does my audience want of me? Not even in terms of viewpoint, but in terms of content, for example. So just to give an example, I love talking about the Bible. I know the Bible super well, right? I mean, in the original Hebrew, we read it every single week. I've done it for 30 years. I would venture to say that I know, the 5 books of Moses, at least, as well as anybody who's not a rabbi. But does my audience want to hear my deep read on Genesis? Right. So I'll talk with Jordan about Genesis, and Jordan's wonderful. And Jordan has a wide variety of interests that he can bring to bear and all these different things where he's talking about religion, but he doesn't read Hebrew. Right. I mean, I read Hebrew. I know all that stuff. I can translate it. I know all of the commentaries on it for 1,000 years. Like, does my audience really want me to analyze Genesis?
Yep.
Probably not. I mean, we tried this. We had a book club, and the book club was, we'd read like great works of literature. So we'd read Moby Dick.
The one where, you were on a deck of a ship.
Right, exactly. So we did one with Moby Dick, and it's like, I love that stuff. Right? I love literary analysis. I read tons. Does my audience desperately want my analysis of Moby Dick? It turned out not. So it's like, okay, well, that's something that they don't want.
Do you ever wish that you didn't do a daily show? You're kind of at the mercy of whatever bullshit happens in the press. P. Diddy gets arrested today. Guess what? We're doing 5 minutes on P. Diddy because it's important for us to. I don't know whether you covered it.
Yeah, no, I didn't cover that in the slightest. I'm so uninterested in that I couldn't possibly care. And there's a certain level of stuff where I'm sure the audience cares, and I can't bring myself to care, so I just won't cover it. Like, unless it's in a funny way. But I guess make a dumb video about the VMAs or something.
As someone who thinks about ideas across a long period of time, who likes to read classics, who's reading stuff in Hebrew, there must be a desire in you to make a Lindy body of work.
Yes, that's it.
And yet, I don't know. I listened to a lot of your show during 2020 because that was the only way I could get daily updates on what the hell was happening with a global pandemic.
Right.
I don't know how many people are going back and listening to
They're not.
May 2020 Ben episodes. So is there a part of you that go, like, I know I've got the books and I've got the other bits and pieces. Is that,
of course,
pull becoming more?
It's a deep struggle. It's like, the thing that I want to do, is that the thing my audience wants to do? Is that something I can justify spending, money to actually produce? I mean, I've done a pilot episode of what a biblical commentary would look like. Is that something that my audience wants from me? I've done, one of the things that I'd love to do is this I do think our audience would love is something called the Historians, which is I want to sit with a group of historians on particular topics and basically do a roundtable where we talk about like the history of World War II. I think the audience would dig that, and I think that'd be very cool. And get Neil Ferguson and get John Keegan and get Victor Davis Hanson in a room and like just sit around a table and do like, let's start in 1933 and do history of World War II. Like people I think would dig that. But I have those big ideas all the time.
You can't indulge all of your personal...
Oh my God. I mean, the stuff that I'm really interested in, I mean, if you look at my nightstand, there's nothing on daily news. I don't put daily news on my nightstand. I mean, the stuff that's on my nightstand is typically like a deep read on military conflict over Taiwan Straits. Right? It's like, is my audience deeply invested? Now, that may come in useful. Like, if China attacks Taiwan, I'm going to know a lot more than sort of the normal commentator would on, well, I know as much as somebody who studies it for a living? No. But will I know 70% of that? Sure. And that's good enough, for it to work. But in terms of like establishing a long-term body, listen, the thing that I'm proudest of in terms of like one product that I've created is The Right Side of History, which is basically a review of Western philosophy over the course of about 250 pages. It was the hardest thing I've had to write. I think it was a really interesting and cogent book. And I think it has shelf life. I think it'll last the test of time. That's part of the problem with doing a daily show. You're exactly right. And I wonder how much video is going to be permanent anyway. I mean, meaning that what's the last kind of political or philosophical video that you've watched that wasn't made in the last year or two? I think that the nature of video is kind of transitory unless you're talking about like a movie from 25 years ago that's self-encapsulated. But a piece of nonfiction content that like, everybody knows who's, politically aware that Milton Friedman did an entire series called Free to Choose. Has anybody ever watched Free to Choose? Probably not. So in the nonfiction space, very difficult to create kind of quote unquote permanent content.
Yeah, archival, as Eric calls it. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where books come in. And that's why I'm still interested in writing books. And, we'll probably come out with a couple in the next few years. But it's definitely a struggle. I like talking big ideas. It's the thing that I'm most interested in. And sometimes the politics of the day does not lend itself to that. And when the news cycle is boring and when there's nothing to talk about, sometimes that's actually when I get to do the thing I want to do. Right. So some of my best shows, I think, are the ones that have the lowest listenership. There was one that I did. I remember this one I thought was kind of cool. I did like a year and a half ago. The news was real slow. And I was talking about the connection between economics and military power. And so there's a really cool YouTube video, which is essentially a moving chart that just shows the nature of military spending over the last like 4 centuries versus GDP in various countries. And I was pointing out how uniquely powerful the United States is and has been, and what that means for Western capitalist, Western capitalist military buildup, and how you actually compete with China, and why China actually is on a pretty bad path here because their economy will collapse, and then they won't have the ability. And so I like sat there and I did like a full history of Western spending on military. Like, I think that stuff's fascinating. I'm sure some of my listeners are probably dying. And so every so often I'll get to, it's like 100 for you and 1 for me. Like, there'll be some of that.
Trust really is everything when it comes to supplements. A lot of brands may say that they're top quality, but few can actually prove it, which is why I partnered with Momentous. They make the highest quality supplements on the planet. They're literally unparalleled when it comes to rigorous third-party testing. What you read on the label is what's in the product and absolutely nothing else. 3 of the products that I use to support my brain, body, and sleep are omega-3, Tonkat Ali, and magnesium L-threonate to support cognitive performance, optimal hormone function, and better sleep. And Dr. Andrew Huberman is the scientific advisor for Momentous. So if you've ever wondered what supplements he would create or what he really uses himself, this is the answer. Best of all, they ship internationally and offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're not sure, you can buy them, try them for 29 days, and if you do not like them, they will give you your money back. Right now, you can head to the link in the description below or go to livemomentous.com/modernwisdom. Use the code modernwisdom at checkout to get 20% off everything site-wide. That's livemomentous.com/modernwisdom and modern wisdom at checkout. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Ben, you'll love the full-length 2-hour-long podcast, which you can watch right here. Go on. Tap it.